Welcome everyone to this free webinar on making every contact count, how to build strong working relationships. For those of you who've not met me before, I'm Melanie Green. I'm a chartered occupational psychologist and work as a coach, facilitator and workplace mediator. And the areas that I work in, the main focus of my work is around personal resilience and people managing the stresses and pressures of work and also life in general. Another area is around effective communication at work, dealing with conflict, effective team working, and then for managers, how they coach, motivate, and lead their teams. So if I'm going to say now, in case people have to leave the webinar early, but if you want more support, then visit my website, inspiretransformation.co.uk, and sign up for Melanie's Monday Motivational Messages. You can take my free coaching audit where you complete a questionnaire and we have a conversation, and you can, to explore how my approach coaching can help you. I also have an 8-week video-based course called Being and Doing. So if you go to the resources page on the website and under shop, you'll find more information about that. And also I have a new program, group coaching program for managers called Making Every Contact Count. So let me talk about and give you an overview of this webinar. We're going to do a poll, first of all, about what problems you face around interacting with others. I'm going to give you an overview of the Making Every Contact Count model that I've created, and then talk about the importance of rapport, matching and listening, linked to that, and then look, how do you manage potentially challenging interactions? I'm going to encourage you to think about the actions that you can take throughout the webinar, and feel free to ask questions via the chat function, and I will send out the PowerPoint later on with other links as well. So you can tick as many of these as you want. So it's about what kinds of interpersonal problems do you find difficult to deal with? So is it around personality clashes? Is it about saying no to people? Asking for what you want and need? Maybe it's about having difficulty avoiding difficult conversations, which we often do. Maybe it's about having the confidence to speak up, whether that's in a meeting scenario, a big meeting or one-to-one, or whether it's about being assertive, or maybe you find managing your manager really difficult. When people attend courses, they think they're going to be talking about actually their team or dealing with their customers, whatever, but often they're talking about their manager and how to manage their manager and interactions with them, and maybe finding it difficult to switch off. So I'm about to end the poll. The most difficult is saying no to other people and having those difficult conversations with others, is knowing how to be assertive. But the others, quite a lot of them have been ticked as well. So everything that we're going to talk about today relates to these points. So you can apply them to all the things that you might be struggling with. So I first of all wanted to talk about the Making Every Contact Count. And I didn't come up with this phrase and this idea, although I've created my own model about it. It's come from the NHS and the social care, and I actually heard about it. One of my voluntary roles is working as a social prescriber in the local community, and that's where they shared this idea of making every contact count. So when I heard about it, I thought, actually, this would be really good, particularly for the managers that I coach and I train, for them to think about, how do I make every contact count? And so I created this model, and I've been running programs around it. And so my model has, one is about building great working relationships, which is what we're going to focus on today. The other is about your emotional intelligence, because unless you, and I break that down into 4 areas. It's about having self-awareness of your thoughts and your mood and how that impacts on your relationships and your communication. It's about being able to manage yourself, and then your empathy for others and your interpersonal skills. So without that emotional intelligence, it's hard to build great working relationships. And it's almost like if you don't have a good relationship with yourself, how can you build good relationships? And it tends to get in, leak into the relationships that you have with other people. And then there is, if you're not a manager, it's the everyday interactions that you're having. But if you're a manager, it's also about everyday coaching, recognizing that when somebody comes to you with a problem or a question, that's an opportunity to create value and to coach them in an informal way. And the final part of my model around making every contact count is about keeping the process going, it not just being a one-off. And I just wanted to share an example from a manager who came on a program I was running earlier on this year, based on this model. And he was fairly new to management, and like many managers today, was incredibly overwhelmed at work. And what he found himself getting into, like many managers, is when a team member would come into the office, is he would continue working. And through the program, he realized that actually that's probably not a very good idea in terms of making every contact count. And he said, so I would stop working and I'd look at them, maybe I'd ask them to sit down, and I'd really focus on what they're saying. And he said, what I noticed is that I didn't just pick up on the content, I picked up on their body language, their tone of voice, how they were feeling. And he said, it's enabled me to really coach them and to help them. It's built the rapport with them, and it's helped to motivate them because they can see that I could care. And down the road, that's going to create less problems for him and help him to uh, to to be less frantic, because a lot of the time his being frantic was going around sorting out everybody else's problems rather than coaching people and developing a strong working relationship. So that's just one example of how making every contact count can help. So we're going to focus on building great working relationships today. So what I wanted to say first of all is there isn't one right way. And I always say this at the beginning of my workshops, and particularly when we're talking about interpersonal relationships. There's a number of us on this webinar. We all have different personalities, so we're going to approach things differently. We will work in different situations and different cultures, so there will be different expectations. Also, the people that we're dealing with have different personalities. So you will find that what works with one person might not work with another. So my work is very much about developing people's confidence as well as your skills, so that you can be as flexible as possible when you are facing potentially difficult conversations with other people. And also in terms of building that great working relationship, you'll do it in different ways with different people, because each person requires something different. So it does complicate matters, but in the long run, it makes life a lot easier. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was in terms of creating about the importance of rapport and creating a real connection with other people. And I always say that in terms of rapport at work, there is a continuum, and there'll be where you've got good friends in the workplace, and there will be people who actually you really don't get on with at all and you try and avoid as much as possible. But in the middle is about having a working level of rapport. And I'm going to share a model in a moment that will, explain why rapport is important. And it might be the fact that you are building rapport in the moment or over a long period of time. So where you have an ongoing relationship, whether that's with customers or clients or with staff or suppliers, then you can build that rapport up over a long time. But sometimes it might be, if you have customers where it's fleeting, it might be that how you build that rapport in the moment. And I've got an example of this is a few weeks ago, I was away on holiday down on the south coast, and I went to the cinema in Bournemouth, and I hadn't been to the cinema for a very long time, and I thought, oh, I'm going to treat myself to one of these reclining seats. It costs more, but it will be really lovely, and so I did that. And when I walked into the screen, is all the seats were reclining. And I thought, well, that's a bit off. Anyway, I watched the movie, had a lovely time. But when I was going out, I thought, I'm going to say something because it doesn't seem fair. And the person who I spoke to was actually very good at building rapport, very good at explaining, and also actually appreciating that their site wasn't very clear about what I was looking at when I was booking my ticket. He also got a manager involved. But those are the sorts of moments where actually you need to build rapport in the moment. And, he was lucky. I was a very calm, I wasn't, I could have been one of those ranty customers, but I wasn't. I was practicing what I preach, and we had a good conversation about it. But that's a good example of building rapport in the moment. So let's look at a model rapport explaining why rapport is so important. And if we don't have rapport with other people, is even if we agree with somebody, or we give them, we thank them for something, or we give them positive feedback, can be seen as really patronizing, and you almost kind of want to brush it off. And I had a manager once where in the first year when I was working with him, actually, we got on like a house on fire. We were definitely at the top, but then it all fell to pieces. We were definitely at the bottom. And so even when he was trying to be positive and encourage me, I just found it patronizing. So when we do have rapport with other people, and they thank us for something, or they give us positive feedback, compliment us, or agree with us, we see it as encouraging, and it feels really good, and it helps to strengthen our rapport even further. On the other side is, if you don't have rapport and you disagree with somebody, is that it appears that you're criticizing them as a person rather than just commenting either on their viewpoint or on one behavior. And it's one of those situations where if you think you've got rapport with somebody and you say something, and it might be that you make a joke and it falls completely flat. It may well be that actually you didn't have the level of rapport that you thought that you had. And so, whereas if you do have that rapport and you've got that strong connection, even you can have quite robust discussions, disagreements, but it's seen as reasonable. It doesn't knock your working relationship. It's more likely people will go away, think about what you said, come back and say, actually, I've thought about it, you're right, or can we talk about it further? And so for me, I always say that having a good level of rapport is like the foundations of any working relationship. And however skilled you are in terms of your communication skills, if you don't first of all build that rapport, then it doesn't work. And so it's really important to be able to do this. So what I'd like to do, and feel free to ask any questions via the chat box if you've got any questions about this. But what I'd like to think about is, who have you got good rapport with? Who do you need to have better rapport? with? Who do you need to build that rapport? And what we have a tendency is that those people that we don't have rapport with, we actually want to avoid. And it's understandable, is that, they're often incredibly difficult. They don't want to talk about anything outside of work. It's hard, maybe they flare up quite easily. But that then undermines your rapport further. And then think about, how do you go about building better rapport? There are many different ways of going about building rapport and maintaining rapport as well. So those people that you naturally, there are some people you meet and you just naturally click. And you don't necessarily have to do much to keep on maintaining the rapport. But the people at the other end of the spectrum, when you're building that rapport, you have to really work at it. And maintain it over maybe the lifetime of that relationship. You can't guarantee the next time you're going to speak to them. So I'm just going to share 3 ideas. The first thing is, and fits in very much with making every contact count, is about regular contact. And what was really interesting in the pandemic for those people who weren't on frontline services and therefore ended up working from home, is that not having that regular contact, that informal contact that you have in the workplace, really started to undermine rapport in some organizations. Some of my clients' organizations handled it really well, and there were some that were having weekly check-ins, some with their teams, and some of them that were using, some of you might have come across my mood map before, using the mood map to check in with everybody. Some people were doing it daily, certainly daily with an individual, just checking in, seeing how they were. So they were really, trying to maintain that rapport, and understanding that, a lot of them, one organization in particular, most of them had children. So most of them were homeschooling as well as trying to work from home. It's, we forget what hellish time it was. And it's why most organizations have gone back to at least hybrid working and saying you need to come into the office. And, it was about rapport, is that we're also understanding that we need that regular contact for that support. Is you're not necessarily spotting when somebody is suffering if they are at home and they're not willing to speak up. So that regular contact is really important. So you might want to kind of think about those people who you don't have such good rapport with. How do you start to reach out to them and start to have that regular contact? And it's difficult because they're, whereas with people we have rapport, we'll say, oh, how was your weekend or your holiday? How's things going? We check in with them. We know them. The other people might not. And that's where these other 2 items come in really important in terms of being able to build rapport with people, often in the moment. So the one is the quality of your listening. So where you haven't got good rapport with people, how you listen to them and really show that you're listening goes a long way to building rapport. And when I was putting this together, I was remembering an exercise that I used to do on courses around listening. And we had, there were 2 questions, is to think about a situation where you have been listened to in the past, and they did this in groups, and how did it make you feel? So people kind of say, oh, I felt really good, and I felt motivated, felt, empathized or whatever else. What did they do that showed that they were listening? And what did you do as a result of that? And then the other was the opposite. So think of a situation where somebody didn't listen to you. How did you know they weren't listening to you? How did that make you feel? And what did you want to do? And what was interesting, where it was people who the person wasn't listening to me, was higher than me in the organization, or it was my manager, the negative emotions were very, very strong. And, it was often that I was demotivated. It completely undermined my confidence. And in terms of what they did as a result, I was kind of going, I decided I'm never going to share my ideas again. I'm not going to speak up in meetings. I'm not going to open up to them because they don't care. Whereas people who were, if it was peers who weren't listening to them, um, or somebody more junior, they were more likely to just go, well, actually, what I did was I spoke up. I said, you're not listening to me. But it was, there's many more people up here in an organization that are probably not listening to people who are reporting to them. And that's having a huge impact in terms of rapport, people's motivation, their confidence, their self-esteem, etc. So it really is such an important skill in itself. There's a wonderful book. I can't remember. I'll send you the link to it. I can't remember who it's by, but it's called Listening: The Forgotten Skill. And I love that subtitle because we forget, because we listen the whole time, we forget that it is a skill that we can work on and we can improve the whole time. So the third thing that you can do, and do very much in the minute, when you're building rapport with people, is about matching them. So what tends to happen when we're naturally in rapport, we match them unconsciously. So we might completely mirror them, and I am not suggesting you do that, because if you don't have rapport, that can really undermine people's undermine the rapport, because people are likely to spot it. So it's about matching them in some way. So sometimes it is about their energy levels, which affects our rate of speech. And I had a client many, many years ago, and she was the director of HR in an organization, and she was very high energy. She spoke very fast. And if I wanted to speak to her, it was before the days of email or messaging. So the only way you could speak to somebody was just pick up the phone and hope you got hold of them. What I found is, what I needed to do is, when I was kind of gearing myself up to go, hi, Sarah, what I want to talk about today is blah, 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 blah. Do you have time? And she'd go, oh, actually, yes, I do. Da, 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 da. And then we could talk. And actually, I can slowly bring her down to a more pace of speech where I could speak, I could breathe. And so it's one way is about me matching them. Sometimes it's about slowing down. It might be if somebody is just a much slower, more thoughtful way of thinking, or maybe if somebody is quite depressed and quite low, they're like to be much slower. So it's slowing down. Also, sometimes it's our tone of voice that needs to change, or our body language. So if somebody comes into our office to talk, it might be saying, actually, sit down if you're already sitting down, or you stand up, so that there's not a mismatch. So it may be about their body language in some sort of way. The other really important thing is about silences. And there's a difference between extrovert thinkers and introvert thinkers. So extrovert thinkers, if you ask them a question, they will answer straight away, because they think as they speak. With introvert thinkers, if you ask them a question, there will be silence, because they think before they speak. And there's a big mismatch there. It doesn't mean that those two can't build rapport, but they need to work on it, because what can happen is the extrovert just talks a lot and the introvert doesn't really say anything. And introverts, generally speaking, unless they've learned to be more assertive, is often find interrupting other people very rude and inconsiderate. But if you think about it, is with an extrovert, if you don't interrupt them, then you're not going to ever get a word in edgeways. And also the conversation might, well, it's not really a conversation because it's one-sided, but so there can be a mismatch. So with extroverts, it's about learning to get comfortable with that silence, enabling that person to have that time to think. is that, and it may be, it's not just counting to 10, sometimes it's quite a long time, about enabling that time to think. With introverts, it might be developing that ability to be more more extrovert, being more assertive, getting used to the idea that if you're dealing with an extrovert, they really won't mind being interrupted. What you don't want to do, though, is get more and more frustrated. And then when the interruption happens, is you do it in a very angry way. So how I will do it is, actually, can I just interrupt you there? I just wanted to go back to something else you've said, or can I just say what my thoughts are on this? So I ask them, I say, but you have to interrupt them in order to get in there. And most of the time they kind of go, oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, I was just waffling on about something or whatever else. So regular contact, listening, matching, really important ways in order to be able to build and rapport, particularly with those people that you don't have naturally good rapport with. So what I'd like you to think about is those people where you don't have good rapport with, is what sort of actions are you going to take to build and maintain rapport? And think about, if you really don't have good rapport, then it's about enhancing those everyday interactions. Because if you ask somebody who you don't have good rapport with, how was your weekend? You'll probably get a fine or rubbish or something like that, or great if they had a good one and they were feeling okay. So it's about what you do in those everyday actions. Well, that's really important. So let's move on to managing interactions with other people. And so I'm going to share with you a model called transactional analysis, or TA for short. And we often get into patterns of behavior with certain individuals. So it might be that with your manager or with a particular colleague, that you get into certain patterns of behavior. I'm coaching a lot of clients at the moment who I'm coaching them in a work context where one of their biggest stressors is having teenage children. And so they find it incredibly useful to talk about how to apply transactional analysis to the family situation as well. So, or it may be in specific situations. So you might kind of say, well, actually, when I am dealing with, I'm fine dealing with strangers, but when I'm dealing with team members, or it might be out of work is whenever I have to call up the utilities, I'm already winding myself up because I've got a problem and they're always hopeless and I spend ages on the phone, and you get yourself wound up before you've even spoken to somebody. And this model can help to explain those patterns of behavior. And the TA gives us an understanding about what's happening. Where am I coming from? Where's the other person coming from? And it helps us to realize that we've got different options and different choices in these situations. So what I'm going to do is explain the modes that we can be communicating from, and then I'll talk you through a model. So 3 modes: parent, adult, child, but there's, as you can see, a lot to each one. So the parent, whether you're a parent or not, is you have an internal parent inside you, and it might be either the nurturing, caring parent. So that's a bit of us that in the workplace, if somebody's really struggling or something's happened outside of work, is we want to support them and we care about them. But we can end up rescuing people or even kind of suffocating people. And so the second part of the parent, the other side of the parent, is the critical controlling parent. It's a bit of we've all got it you know, there's no getting away with it, is that it might come out in little ways. And I'll give you some examples out of work that lots of people can manage to. The amount of arguments that happen over how to stack a dishwasher, it's because this is my way. It's your controlling parent. Does it really matter? But that's your controlling parent. Road rage is critical controlling parent. And taken to extreme, both in and out of work, can be very overpowering. And when we talk about people bullying in the workplace, it's their critical controlling parent that has taken over. I'll come back to the adult in a moment. There's the child mode. So although we're grown-ups, we don't always behave like grown-ups. A lot of, quite a bit of the time, and in some organizations, a lot of the time. So there is the fun, carefree child. It's where our sense of humor comes from. It's really important. It gives us a lot of energy. It's important in the workplace. It's where our creativity comes from. And it's a good way, once we have rapport, our fun child can help to maintain it. But if we don't have rapport, and with those people who are particularly tricky, is using our fun child and our sense of humor can fall really flat. So it's a great way, once that rapport has been built, to maintain it. So it's watching out for it, but it is really important in the workplace. There's the adaptive child, the bit of us that goes along with social norms. We say please and thank you, we open doors for people. Taken to extreme, though, it can be that people just want to be told what to do, be done, and what to do in the workplace. And then there's other aspects of the child. There's the fearful child. There's a lot of people with, a lot more people seem to be anxious nowadays. That's their fearful child. I always hold my stomach because there's always that sinking feeling in my stomach, and that kind of what if is your fearful child has. You may have some sulky children in your workplace. Is that there's usually at least one in a team, depending how big the team is. Is who can sulk for England? You might have people who have a strong rebellious child. It doesn't matter how old you are. I always use the example of my dear departed mother. But even late into her 80s, if she felt controlled, then she would, her rebellious child would come out. So it doesn't matter how old you are, or your manipulative child. So both the parent and the child are they're driven by things outside them. So somebody cries, we want to support them. Somebody cracks a joke, we laugh. Somebody shouts at us, our fearful child comes out. If somebody cuts us up in the motorway, it might be either our fearful child or our critical controlling parent that comes out. Whereas the adult is about managing our emotions. So when we're in adult mode, we're calm and we're rational. Yes, we have those emotions, but we manage those. And we really listen to other people. We ask questions. We seek to understand. We respect other people's rights, but we also respect our own. So we don't walk over others, and we stick up for ourselves and don't let other people walk over us. We don't play games. We are open and honest, and we aim for win-win outcomes. And we also take responsibility for actions, decisions, and mistakes. And I've been using this model for about 40 years in different organizations. And what I'm going to do is talk through how things play out and how it fits into making every contact count. But in terms of the interactions that we have, there's you and there's other people, is in working with organizations for so long, I don't really know anywhere when things start to go wrong, people don't go into parent-child interactions at the start. Now, if they haven't learned how to control that, then that just plays out and that's all that happens. However, it is about managing those emotions to be able to then come into the adult and be able to have, as appropriate, an adult to adult conversation. If somebody is, very fearful, you might do some nurturing parent first of all, and then go into the adult. So rather than rescue people, you'd empathize and nurturing parent, but rather than go into rescuing them, go into the adult. And it is about this in terms of making every contact count. It's looking at, how do I make sure that my interactions with others are coming from the right place, dependent on where they are and what we want to achieve in this interaction. So sometimes, as I said, it might be nurturing parents, sometimes where there's good rapport and maybe everyone needs a breather or needs a light and a low, it might be having a bit of a laugh. And a lot of the time it will be adult to adult. And from adult, you can then go, you can slip into that nurturing parent or slip into that fun child as appropriate. And it's choosing to do the right thing at the right time and place. And to really make sure that every contact counts. Because when you get it wrong, it starts to undermine the working relationship. So again, think about what actions are you going to take to change how you interact with people, particularly how you interact with people where there's not such good rapport. Is that, and maybe it might even be somebody who's just new to your team and still in that rapport phase, and making sure, particularly I think where people are new, is that you don't go into too much. Obviously you do some nurturing parent, but you don't end up rescuing them. You have lots of adult to adult. So coaching questions and conversations come from that adult to adult to get the other person thinking for themselves. Just think about, how are you going to make every contact count? And it may be that you've kind of gone, actually, I really need to apply this outside of work with somebody. Maybe it's in a voluntary role. Maybe it's somebody in your family. It's, thinking about that. A number of my coaching clients are, again, I'm coaching them in a work context, but are also in caring roles for elderly parents. All of this is just as applicable to dealing with in the workplace, with customers, with teenage children, with younger children as well, with partners, with elderly parents, who it's all applicable. So, think about, who do you need to build better rapport with? How are you going to build that rapport? Which TA mode do you tend to fall into a lot of the time? So maybe you're really stressed and overwhelmed and you're going into that critical controlling parent a lot of the time. Maybe it's you're anxious a lot of the time. You're in that fearful mode. Or you're really caring, you're doing a lot of nurturing, but you're rescuing too many people and you're ending up overwhelmed yourself. So if there's not any questions and everything's clear, is that, as I said earlier, if you want to go to inspiretransformation.co.uk, sign up for Melanie's Monday Motivational Messages. You'll find out about future webinars there. Also, you can take my free coaching audit and join my 8-week, if you want to sign up and join my 8-week video-based course, Being and Doing, go to the shop and click on that. And also I've got this group coaching program for managers starting in early February around making every contact count. I also run that in-house as well. Oh, I'm glad you have found it useful. Thank you very much. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.